Defense stocks are booming in Europe, but crashing in the US. With NATO funding under pressure, the war in Ukraine at a crossroads, and the US military cuts on the table, the global defense landscape is shifting fast. Let's dive into the numbers, the policies, and the big winners in this evolving power struggle.
Gary, thing number 4, we're talking European defense stocks. They are up big. Thing number 4, Gary, tell us more.
So basically what's happened is we've gotten some really interesting comments by Vice President Vance, Defense Secretary Hegseth, and President Trump, and they've been criticizing the defense spending of fellow NATO members in the war in Ukraine. Now, this does not surprise us. DKI has been talking about this for months, and in President Trump's first term, he was critical of the fact that most European NATO members do not spend the amount of money on defense that they have committed to. They're not living up to their contractual obligations. And because the US is starting to back off and saying, hey, Europe, you guys need to be more responsible for your own defense. We don't want to be the ones footing the whole bill or the majority of the bill. We want you to take a greater role in your own defense. And European governments are taking President Trump seriously. They are starting to commit more military spending. They're ready to take on more responsibility, and their defense stocks have seen significant growth.
So, Gary, we've got Europe spending more on defense. Are we going to see the same thing here in the United States?
We are seeing the opposite here in the U.S. Basically, and President Trump was clear about this in his first term, and he's been talking about this and basically saying we do not want to be paying as much for European defense as we are. We think that Europe should spend more on their own defense. And so the U.S. is actually in the process of trying to cut military spending. This is consistent with efforts from Elon Musk and Doge and trying to make the whole U.S. government more efficient and less expensive. I would also point out that DKI put in writing not so long ago that President Trump was going to use threats of tariffs to convince our fellow NATO members to spend more money on their own defense. We always thought the threats of European tariffs were not actually an effort to get more tariffs, but rather a negotiating point to get them to shoulder a greater portion of the expense for their own defense. And that does seem to be the direction things are going. Now, who knows? We could see a shift in global alliances. The U.S. could end up spending more. We could end up with tariffs. But right now, it looks like things are shaking out pretty much the way that we told you they would just a couple of months ago.
Gary, as one more follow-up to that, does this have anything to do or any impact on the tariffs on EU exports that we talked about to the U.S.?
I think it will. Right now, talk about European tariffs. And yes, there have been some tariffs on certain specific industries or certain specific products. But right now, we don't have across the board European tariffs. I don't know that that's really the goal of this administration. I think, what they really want is for NATO members to pay what they are contractually obligated to pay. And that does seem to be the direction this is headed. Now, the one exception to this, Rob, is President Trump has said we want reciprocal tariffs. And that's just a fancy way of saying, okay, hey, if you guys are going to tariff U.S. goods at 20%, we're going to put a 20% tariff on your goods. If you're going to tariff us at 70%, we're going to put a 70% tariff on your goods. And I actually think that's really good policy. I think good relationships are reciprocal. And there is something in my view and in the view of this administration, there's something wrong with the idea that a country would say, we like free markets, but we're going to put tariffs on your goods. No, if you want free markets, that goes both ways. Reciprocal tariffs is a really good way of saying we can have high barriers to trade or low barriers to trade, but we're not going to let you take advantage of us. So I actually think the administration has done a really good job positioning themselves on this. Now, let's be clear. Policies have not gone into place yet. These things are shifting. So, could we be saying something different in a future version of the 5 things? Yeah. Of course, these things shift all the time, and, stay tuned. We'll keep you updated as these policies change, as these relationships change. But it does seem like there's going to be a little bit of a shift and our relationship with Europe. But right now, it looks like it's more a matter of reciprocal tariffs and an attempt to get NATO members to pay what they're contractually obligated to pay for their own defense. That, for clarity, it's to defend themselves.